So, Secretary, thank you for doing this with us. This room is exquisite. This is the cash room. That's what they call it. My first time being in here. What is this place?
Well, we're in the Treasury building, which is an incredible building, part of the White House campus. And the cash room is really one of the crown jewels in the building. And it was used for many years, for many of the original presidents, as the site of the inauguration party.
And it is, so what does it date back to?
Well, the building is about 1825 to 1850. So, and it was built in stages. This looks like it was part of the original stage, just because as we approached the Civil War, things got a little more austere. So
yeah.
This is a grand, beautiful room, not unlike what the president wants to do next door with the ballroom.
Yeah, which I feel like that was a big trap that he set for the left and Democrats. I think that's a no-brainer to do the ballroom, and everyone acted like it was so outrageous.
Well, not only is it needed, it's a gift to the American people from President Trump, from donors. So what do the American people ever get that's free? It is a great addition at an important time.
Wouldn't it have been more clever if the Democrats had just said, thank you for building us a ballroom because we're going to beat you next time, and then we're going to party in your ballroom? Instead, they said we're going to knock it down or something?
Well, I mean, they knock everything down. Like, it's an institution, it's a building, it's something that's good for the American people, and they've got to bring it down. I told a friend of mine the other day, I said, if Donald Trump invented a cure for cancer, the Democrats would say, and the mainstream media would say, yeah, but it causes dandruff.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. The Wall Street Journal, in one of their few good editorials lately, had a piece the other day by a clinical psychiatrist, and the question was, is there Trump derangement syndrome? Is it a psychological condition? And he concluded it is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there's also, I didn't know this is new. Did you know this, John? There's a Department of the Treasury flag. This is news to me.
Yep. I'm not wearing it today, but that's why traditionally a lot of Treasury secretaries wear green flags.
I thought it was just money.
Well, the Solomon Chase, who was one of the most important Treasury secretaries under President Lincoln, he financed the Civil War for the United States against the Confederacy, and he invented the term greenback. So there actually used to be numerous currencies around the country. Individual states, individual banks could issue their own currency, and he consolidated it into the greenback.
So the Treasury flag is green because of the greenbacks?
Because of the greenback.
Wow. So this is kind of where I wanted to begin, just getting some of your background history, which is so interesting. But the Treasury Secretary, I think there were 3 original cabinet secretaries: Department of War, State, and Treasury. This is a really legendary position. It's a part of history. When did you feel like you might be a great match for that?
I thought I would be a good match to be President Trump's Treasury Secretary. So, or just to be part of his administration. So I went to him. Where are we now? It must have been almost 3 years ago now, and said, "Sir, I think you're going to win. I think it's going to be transformational, and I would like to be part of the economics team." So,
was he familiar with you?
I had known the Trump family for a long time. I've been very good friends with his brother Robert, who passed away. I was at his father's funeral, and I always tell the president, I said, I think you think maybe your West Point speech was your greatest speech, or his UN speech recently was fantastic. But I actually thought that the eulogy he gave at his father's funeral was incredible. I've been friends with the Trump family. The president I've just gotten to know over the past couple of years.
What's been the most surprising thing you've learned as Treasury Secretary about the job that you weren't expecting?
The national security aspect. So I would say that I spend 40 or 50% of my time on national security, whether it's sanctions, whether we're looking at long-term policy in terms of reshoring, strategic industry, industries, covert actions. You would see before there's an action against the Houthis or before there's an action against the Iranians, Treasury had been in there for days, weeks, months, years, going after Iranian assets around the world. We have a maximum pressure campaign on the Iranians to stop the sale of Iranian oil.
Right.
We call it sources and uses. So we want to stop the source. Same thing, President Trump gave the order, seems like it was about a month ago now, to sanction the two largest Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. That's all carried out through Treasury. And it's an economic war. We call it peace through economic strength.
So what is the exact responsibilities of the Treasury Secretary?
Under the statute, maintaining the economy of the United States, helping the American people prosper, and then we also are in charge of the debt management, which unfortunately has become a bigger job these days. And then underneath Treasury, there's also the government payment system, there's the Mint, there is the IRS, there's the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency.
And what occupies most of your time in that portfolio?
It's some of everything. It's some of everything. And again, national security is something that the administration's been laser focused on during this time, because we have said, President Trump says it, economic security is national security is economic security. So Treasury gets more, has actually taken a front-leaning role in that. I'm part of the National Security Council also.
So you touched on something that's really essential, I think, for our audience in particular, which is that you're a very, very sharp fit with President Trump. Like, it fits we saw this very early on when you were out there and were in consideration. We thought this is a perfect match. But that might not have always been the case, or maybe it always was. You've got this amazing history where you had humble beginnings, became a Wall Street wunderkind, and had a sort of meteoric rise. And then you were a Democrat for a long time, and I think even supporter of Hillary Clinton, if I remember. And then there's had to be a day where you woke up and think Trump is for real. Can you take us back to when that was, and when it dawned on you that you guys are completely simpatico on these issues?
So Alex, this is a good opportunity to clarify the record.
Please,
because
please.
I think we can scratch out some New York Times talking points.
Yeah, let's do that.
Never a Democrat. Over the years, I would say I've donated $15 million to Republicans, maybe $300,000 or $400,000 to Democrats.
Wow.
Total. One notable was in 2000, I held a fundraiser for Al Gore.
Okay.
But you got to remember, back in 2000, Al Gore and George W. Bush were just like that.
Sure.
The two parties weren't like that.
Yes, it's true.
And I actually think it's more, the Republicans were here and the Democrats have just fallen off the left side of the page. So, and look, it might have been a very different world in terms of Iraq, Afghanistan, the endless wars. But I thought President Bush, on many things, did a good job.
Okay.
Someone said, "Oh, well, you donated to President Obama." During the primaries, I think I gave $1,500 because I disliked Hillary Clinton so much.
That's amazing.
And then I gave the money to something called Ready for Hillary, because I wanted to go and sit in the room and hear what they had to say. And I walked out of that meeting and I said, they're going to lose. That's when Harold Ickes Jr. had this meeting in New York with a bunch of financial people, and that was the best research money I ever spent.
See, it sounded like a dumb question, but then I got a great answer, so I'm glad I asked it. But then there's a moment where you see Trump, and he has got a completely revolutionary idea for the economy relative to other Republicans. It's exactly our language, but not the establishment. And this is resonating with you. Talk to us about that revelation.
Well, a reporter from the Financial Times the other day said, "You seem to be the most MAGA Treasury Secretary of all time."
Yes.
Why do you think that? And I said, look, if you look back over the history of my career, I've made money betting against elite consensus.
Right.
Whether it was, we've never had a national housing crisis.
Sure.
Nothing's wrong underneath
Home prices
the hood.
can't go down.
Home prices can't go down. And where were the regulators? Where was the Federal Reserve? And same thing, 2012, 2013. Oh, Japan can never come out of deflation. And I just met this guy named Abe. And with a lot of this, it's very personnel is policy, policy is personnel. And when I saw what President Trump was doing, one of my biggest single trading gain days was the 2016 victory. And I don't know if everyone remembers, but the market crashed the night President Trump won. Crashed.
Yes, yeah, of course.
It was the end of the world.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
this, it was that. And I'm sitting there, I'm watching John King from CNN in tears, because I still remember, he does the thing where he moves the map around, and he's moving it around, and he goes, Hillary Clinton has no path to the presidency, and the market just went straight down.
Unbelievable.
So that I bet against the elite consensus of this panic, and because so many people in the investment community were the Hillary supporters. They were all gathered in the New York Convention Center for the glass ceiling because she was going to break the glass ceiling.
Unbelievable.
I think she could do it with her voice.
A little on the nose with that one, the symbolism.
But look, if you believe that elite consensus is often wrong, and you had a view that our country was on the wrong course, which I did, and back to the letting China into the global trading system without guardrails. That was this elite consensus, and it didn't work. It didn't work. Same thing in 2011. Pre-2011, I think you could have made a plausible argument, not one I would have made, but you could have, that China, if we brought them into the global system, they become more like us, things level out, CCP goes away eventually. But when President Xi came in, you just had to say that this is a doubling down on the Maoist-style governance, and we're going to the extent we did that, we're going to do that. And I just think this refusal to admit that you're wrong is the people I've modeled my investment career on are the best at changing their minds. This isn't working, and instead of doubling down, you pull back, and that's why President Trump is so incredible for the American people, for the economy. He takes all points of view,
yeah,
and he has a very open mind.
That to bring you back to Election Day 2016, the market crashed, but then it reversed very quickly. And I remember the day before, I was a financial reporter, and we were all prepping. We were all being told, guys, if Trump wins, everything's going down. But that turned out to be, it was right for a couple hours, turned around. The same thing happened with Brexit as well. The elite consensus was everything will crash, and instead we got this rebound.
Same thing, and Brexit took about a week or 10 days. It was the global bond market, these swaps between the UK and the rest of the world. And it was the same thing. And a lot of times, too, you don't, with President Trump, I was election 16, I was right in advance. With Brexit, I thought British were going to vote to leave, but you didn't have to have a vote on it that day because you got a big opportunity.
Right.
So is it ever frustrating you when you're talking to people and they don't see it? Because I think we're past this too, but I thought Brexit would happen. I thought Trump would win in 2016. And you talk to people and they look at you like you've got a horn coming out of your head.
Well, look, it was the same thing when I saw very early that President Trump was going to win in 24.
Yeah.
And I went and I was telling a lot of Wall Street people that.
Yeah.
And they just had to go through the whole cycle of everybody who was up on stage in Milwaukee. Many of them great candidates, many of them not so great candidates. And it was, well, what about this one? What about that one? It was, Trump's going to win. You're crazy. There's this, there's that. And the thing that struck me and really convinced me was there's this idea in financial markets, if something goes up on bad news, it's a super stock.
Right.
Okay, I'll pick on Microsoft. If Microsoft reports bad earnings, the stock goes down, but then keeps going, then everyone realizes that was just a short-term blip, but something's going on in the background, whether it's AI or big transformational change at the company. And I could see that the more the Democrats doubled down on the lawfare on President Trump, whether it was the Mar-a-Lago raid or the nonsense in Atlanta, the district attorney, the city of New York, the attorney general for the state of New York, the more they attacked it, the more his poll numbers went up.
Yeah.
The more his poll numbers. So he had broken out, and I was just convinced. And it's never easy.
Right.
Look,
But it's interesting how people don't see this, because we think so similarly. I thought once they started sifting through Melania's underwear, I thought Trump's going to win for sure. And then they tried to kill him and shot him in the ear. I thought now he's definitely going to win.
Yep.
And yet, you wake up election day and then you would see the news coverage and you think this is Kamala's going to win. So one thing tactically that you do incredibly well, the best of anyone in the cabinet, and the cabinet has lots of great people in this, is when you're speaking to the establishment media, I feel like you have a great way of dealing with their gotcha questions. And does that come from your background as a teacher? Does this come from arguing with people at Yale University, students? Because it feels like you've got this professorial nature to you.
Well, Alex, a couple of things.
Yeah.
One, so I taught seminars at Yale, so
Yeah.
18 students around a table and great back and forth. So it's part of that. Part of it's from arguing with people on Wall Street.
Yeah.
And then the third part of it is I have facts and they have opinions. And they hate facts. They hate facts. It's the same thing. Everyone was like, "Oh, you really?" Like for a congressional or Senate hearing, "Oh, you really let the Senator so and so or Representative so and so had it?" I said, "No, I just repeated the facts."
Yeah.
And they have a card that, a lot of times in the case of the Sunday shows, that a producer or a research assistant's written out, and they can't go the next level down.
Right.
They got a producer screaming in their ear, we cut him off. And it's the same thing in a Senate or congressional hearing. Some staffer has prepared something.
Yes.
Then as soon as you say, well, why would you say that? They said, no, just stick to yes or no, please.
Do you feel like I feel like there's a resistance, particularly among anti-Trump figures, to understand when he's right and to give him credit for it and to go for it. And I feel like what you just said, that and you've been a wild success in everything you've done, and you say that you're really willing to change your mind to hear all sides. And why is there such a resistance to do that particularly on the left, but just in general, human nature? And why can't we understand that changing our minds sometimes is how you get to the next level?
Well, I think that people have succeeded just with a conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
The crowd's right a lot, but the way you have big either transformational change in politics or you make a lot of money in the market is to be right when the crowd's wrong, and to call the turn.
Well, this brings us to a place where you've been right, and I think we've been right, which is on tariffs. People said tariffs are going to, cause massive inflation, a retaliatory trade war. You were right that this wasn't going to happen. It has not happened. Instead, we have low inflation, and instead of a trade war, you've been all around the world cutting deals. How did you get it right, and has anybody apologized to you for doubting you?
Well, no one ever apologizes, but let's look. I think you all may have written about it. The San Francisco Fed, which is hardly even Center's Center, came out and did a study. 150 years of the trade data shows that tariffs make inflation go down and makes economic growth go down. And I think we don't have to, so then you'd say, well, okay, now you're making economic growth go down. And you'd say, well, what's different this time is we're getting all the tariff revenues in, and we're doing these trade deals, and companies are reshoring. So like if you had done, there's always the moment in time that if you had done these trade deals before we were so far out of balance, or before so much manufacturing had moved overseas, you might, like, the tariffs could have made the GDP go down.
Right.
But now that our manufacturing base, our strategic industry base is so gutted that as you bring the manufacturing back because of the tariffs, then you're going to get this fill up. I've always said, and looks like the Supreme Court agrees with me, that tariffs should be a melting ice cube. That you start out in a way that the high tariffs are a payback for the economic mismanagement or the predatory behavior of other countries. And as you bring back industry, the tariffs go down, but the income taxes from manufacturing industry, from wages, goes up. So as you rebalance,
and not even because the rate goes up, just because the earnings are going up.
Well, exactly, and GDP is going up, and growth is going up. So the goal here is to rebalance the goal. And at the beginning, substantial tariff income is a nice adjunct, and in a way, you're being paid back for all these unfair trade practices. The way I think about it, when you look, Japan, Korea have agreed to make substantial investments that we can direct into the U.S., $550 billion, $350 billion. In a way, how did they get these big surpluses?
Right.
They got these big surpluses through unfair trade. They could have either sovereign wealth funds or big central bank balances, and in a way, we're just repatriating those back to the U.S.
Is that one of the reasons we haven't seen the retaliation? Is basically our trading partners more or less fessed up? Yeah, you guys had a raw deal for years.
Wow.
One of the reasons we haven't seen retaliation, and it was one of the things that I hadn't thought about, that President Trump intuited early on, and a lot of this, like he intuits, and very correct, was everyone wants to do business in the United States of America. We're the biggest consumer market. No other country could do what we just did, because you don't have to. It's nice to be in Canada, to trade with Canada. You don't have to. It's nice to trade with Singapore. You don't have to. Anyone who wants to sell a product and be a global player has to trade with the United States of America.
Right, so they couldn't afford to say, we're going to retaliate. There's nobody else. They didn't have another market.
We can't take our ball and go home.
Right.
Just tell us, how do we get our ball onto the court?
Right.
But what's interesting to me, just because we write the Breitbart Business Digest and we've been working on this for years, that tariffs is the right approach. You've been very clear-eyed, steadfast on this. It's worked out perfectly. You've gotten no apologies. That's an outrage. You should get a bunch. But it seems like the establishments of both political classes, left and right, the establishment conservative crowd and the Larry Summers Democrat crowd, all of them were out there. I mean, I guess he was flying around looking for romance with Epstein and starting sovereign wealth funds.
Well, his fascination was with one of the biggest Chinese propagandists in the world. So I got excoriated by a couple of former Treasury secretaries, because I said on Fox News, after Summers had come after me, that I said, you always got to look and see what Larry's motives are and who's paying him.
Now we know what some of his motives were there. But one of the things that, as you guys have been doing these deals, and I think that kept surprising people, it really felt like sometimes the mainstream media were rooting for retaliation.
Wow.
Not just that they were predicting it, and a lot of economists as well. They were saying, oh, that's it, there's going to be retaliation, the Trump administration will have to back down. And even when you guys cut deals, they accused you of backing down.
Well, that was a crazy thing.
Yes.
So the only country who retaliated was China,
Right.
Its second biggest economy in the world. And at a point, we were at 145 and 125% tariffs. And John, it's exactly as you said it. President Trump knows the game now, but I think he's still annoyed by it. He said, I had 58% tariffs on China, and everyone accused me of backing down because they had been at 145. Well, 145 is an embargo.
Right. And you guys have, it was very clear from the beginning that the initial Liberation Day tariffs were negotiating tariffs. They were, here's what you get if you don't deal with us.
Well, not only that, President Trump had a strategy, and I think one of the reasons he and I work well together is I can actually see his vision.
Yes.
And having been in financial markets a long time, I try to explain it to market participants, but they have to listen. Because you could go back and look. On Liberation Day, I did an interview and basically remain calm, that the numbers you saw in the Rose Garden, if a country doesn't retaliate, those will be the highest numbers you've seen.
Right.
So, but the market panicked, and I said to President Trump, or President Trump had told me, he said, don't use the word negotiate initially, because he wanted to apply maximum pressure.
Sure.
And it worked. That when you put these big numbers on, because everything, the way humans work is calibration. So when you've had a 50% tariff and it moves down to 20 or 15, I've never seen so many leaders thank the president
Rejoice, right.
for a 15%
Yes.
tariff.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah,
We appreciate the 15%.
Yes.
It was a total game changer.
But only he had the risk tolerance and the understanding of how it was going to turn out to do it. And it was a complete game changer.
But it's a remarkable thing, it's a test case for what we just discussed about people not changing their minds, because this is a clear one. Almost everyone was wrong, and so will people change their perspective? And you don't even need to react to that. I would just think that over time this is a very clear example where the conventional wisdom of both parties was tariffs are not a good idea, and they've worked beautifully.
Well, and there are plenty of Democrats who like tariffs, but they can't like it because Donald Trump likes it.
Amen.
Exactly. And they're just incapable of moving away from the hive.
Yeah.
The hive, it's increasing prices, it's doing this, it's doing that, and it hasn't and it won't.
So we've got dividends now, or we've got a lot of extra money coming to the Treasury from the tariffs, and there's a debate on what to do with that's going on. Do you have a perspective on that?
Well, again, Alex, that goes back to it's going to be a calamity, that no one's going to want to own U.S. bonds.
Yeah.
Bond markets had its best year since 2020. The U.S. is the only major economy where interest rates are lower, and that 10-year. I'm talking about the 10-year, and then even the Wall Street Journal. I actually they had an article the other day, and I went back to being a professor, and I underlined the pieces in red, and had someone in our public affairs department send it to the editor.
Did you grade it?
D minus. D minus. Oh no, the 10 years down because the Fed has lowered interest rates 50 basis.
Right.
And because the economy's soft. Well, if the economy's soft, then the Fed should be lowering more.
Sure.
But we had a fiscal contraction in the third, fourth quarter because of tariffs and because we're controlling spending. And the world took notice of that. Some of it is from tariffs. Overall, and it's not an epic reduction, but everyone was saying that the deficit to GDP, or the deficit was going to be $2 trillion, and the deficit to GDP, which is I think the important number, was going to go higher. For the fiscal year that ends September 30th of this year, the deficit went down from 1.8 trillion to 1.78. But to bring it down, then the economy grew.
We got 3.8% growth in the second quarter, and I think Atlanta Fed says we're at 4.2 for the third quarter.
Yeah.
So this is where I want to take the conversation next. So the Atlanta Fed says we're growing 4.2%. We blow out jobs report this week. We have money coming in from the tariffs. Inflation is down. There's still inflation, but it's down. But what's happening in the press in particular is that you guys are getting blamed for affordability issues. And this is, I think it's a media problem, but also policy can improve it too. Give me your sort of 360 worldview on this.
Okay, so a couple of things. In March of 24, I wrote something for Fox Digital, and everyone go back and pull it up, March 12th, and it was called How the Three I's Are Eviscerating Working Americans. So what were the three I's? Immigration, interest rates, and inflation. Borders closed, promise made, promise kept. 10-year was 508. I think it's at 4 now. And mortgage rates key off of that. I think short-term interest rates could come down more, so interest rates down. And now we're at inflation. And inflation is coming down. Energy prices are down. Over my career, all or most big inflation start with an energy problem. And so energy goes into everything, even food prices at the grocery store. So we've got that. And I am very confident over the coming 3, 6, 12 months, we are going to see the third eye bite the dust, and inflation is going to come down. And I will preview it for you all, that we have a study that we're going to release from the Council of Economic Advisors. Guess what the best way to get your inflation rate down 50 or 60 basis points is? Move from a blue state to a red state. So red state inflation is at least 0.5% lower than blue state inflation. And I'm not dodging responsibility, because there are things that we can control, that we are working to get prices down, but there are things we can't control. The governor-elect of New Jersey, in her, I don't know, it was an acceptance speech or a few days after, said, my priority is going to be getting down energy prices, or home energy prices. It was her predecessor, Phil Murphy, who destroyed the people in New Jersey through this crazy green scheme that he had. Someone from the administration calls Governor Hochul all the time. We want to put these pipelines into New York. We want to send them up to New England. If the Northeast wants to deindustrialize and have higher inflation, if they want Europification, which is what I think they're doing, people are voting with their feet.
Talk to me about the deregulation agenda.
It's massive. And again, I think that's why with the deregulation agenda, if you think what happened, why was Trump 1.0? Why could you have great non-inflationary growth? You created demand shock, private sector with the tax bill, and that was met by substantial deregulation, and that's how you get the low inflation.
You're also working on trying to free up mainstream banks so they can lend to mainstream businesses. In the wake of the financial crisis, we enacted a lot of regulations that people thought were going to apply to the big banks, but they've been constraining the community banks. I wanted you to...
Well, 45% of Main Street banks have disappeared since the GFC. 45%. So we had too big to fail. but all these regulations set up what I call too small to succeed. And these Main Street banks, they are 70% of ag loans, 40% of small business loans, commercial real estate loans. They drive the small town, medium town, and even big city America, but with small businesses. And we've got to get that back. And again, back to the notion, what's a conventional wisdom that Wall Street and Main Street both can't succeed? Well, Wall Street's done great, and now it's Main Street's turn. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board took a shot at me, saying, "Oh, you're coming after Wall Street." And I said, "Gentlemen, I notice you're not called the Main Street Journal." And we are focused on working Americans, but there's no schism here. Both can do well. We've just got to, it might not feel great over here for a little while, but we've got to enact the policies that help working Americans. You've got to believe that you are going to be better off because of this administration, that your children are going to be better off, and that's what we work for every day.
We got to rebrand the Breitbart Business Digest.
The Main Street Journal.
Yes,
I like it.
yes.
Okay, they're gonna ask for your time back soon. Can we rapid fire? Zohran Mamdani's at the White House. Any advice for him?
I would. I don't know what he knows everything, so I can't give him any advice. If you're going to create Caracas on the Hudson,
well, his answer to affordability is going to be rent control.
You've never made things more affordable by creating scarcity, and there's prices are low in Caracas and Havana. So, now my advice is.
Yep.
He can't get out of this, but this workers' paradise socialist experiment, if you could show me, I'm an economic historian, not an economist, show me one place it's ever worked.
Yeah. Ask a question about rare earths, please.
Yeah, well, so you've done an amazing job, but it keeps coming up, the rare earths problem with China, where we negotiate with them, they say they're going to sell us rare earths, then something happens, they change their mind, they stop it. Sometimes this looks like maybe rogue agents in China. But one question that we have is, this doesn't seem sustainable. We can't stay dependent on China. Is the administration moving to move us away from rare earth dependence to rare earth independence?
What you are saying, John, is we are taking back our sovereignty. And that it's inexcusable. And again, this is back to like this unfettered free trade idea. The technology, especially in rare earth magnets that's being used against us, it was US technology. General Motors sold the company to a Chinese company in 1995. The Chinese company was required to keep the business onshore in the US. 5 years and a day, they moved it to China. Since then, anytime anyone tries to stand up one of these rare earths critical mineral facilities, Chinese come in, they flood the market, unfair competition, and no administration has done anything about it. President Trump tried to in the first administration, and the environmentalists we'd rather be poor. And so a group of us came in, and we are determined that it's not just rare earths, but rare earths is the centerpiece of this. I was down in my home state of South Carolina, a small town called Sumter. 2 weeks ago, the first rare earth magnet made in the U.S. in 25 years was made in Sumter, South Carolina.
Congratulations.
And they're gonna have the plant opening. Maybe you all want to come down with me for it in January or February.
Let's go.
But it's a great American story too, because most of the work, so 300 jobs at this plant, 800 construction jobs to build it. They think it could be 10 times bigger, so it could end up being 3,000 jobs. They would be able to supply the US with the rare earths that we need. It had been, that town, the predominant employer other than the Air Force, had been a Caterpillar factory that had closed. So I asked the plant manager, how'd you decide who you're going to hire? And he said, you know, if some of these folks had been at Caterpillar for 10, 15 years and they'd stuck with them, it was an easy hire. So, like, that's what reindustrialization looks like.
Right.
Same trip. I went to the Boeing plant in Charleston. Because of all the trade deals, they are expanding their Dreamliner facility by 50%, 1,000 new great paying, great benefit jobs in Charleston, South Carolina. So, but we got a problem in rare earths, we got a problem in pharmaceuticals, we got a problem with semiconductors, steel, shipbuilding. Those are strategic. Like, we don't need to decouple from China, we just have to de-risk.
Right.
And no one was willing to de-risk because it's hard. It's not easy, but President Trump has told the pharmaceutical companies, you're bringing the production here, that 70, 80, 90% of the precursors for our pharma products come from China.
All imported. Right.
All imported. We are incredibly vulnerable. Like as John, as you mentioned, the Chinese tug on the rare earth choker collar. What they haven't done is threaten us on the precursor chemicals, because that would, they have maintained a certain level. But amoxicillin, which anyone with children has given to a child with a fever, that they control 100% of that. So we are de-risking, not decoupling. I think we're in a good place for the next year with the Chinese. I think we can have some equanimity in the relationship, and then we are running forward as hard as we can.
Well, I think I'd love to pick up on that maybe next time, but they're giving us the giant hook here.
Okay.
You've been so generous with your time, Secretary, and we always appreciate what you're doing at Breitbart News, Breitbart Business Digest, and I look forward to having more of these conversations down the road.
Good, and congratulations. You both get A's for your early analysis.
Thank you.
On the
Thank
economics.
you, Mr. Secretary.